Today we're cracking open a massive cultural collision. We're looking at the intersection of celebrity political opinion, deep sociological risk, and, well, the surprisingly enduring relevance of 18th century utopian communities.
We have a fascinating stack of sources designed just for you. We're starting with the actress Amanda Seyfried, who recently found herself right at the epicenter of a political firestorm.
Right, over comments she made about the late conservative activist Charlie Kirk.
Exactly. And we have sources detailing that whole controversy right alongside a major academic study that analyzes the complex global forces that are driving modern political polarization.
But the real mission of this deep dive is to connect those dots. Seyfried wasn't just, speaking off the cuff. She was fresh off this intense preparation for a new film.
Where she plays the historical radical Ann Lee, the founder of the Shakers.
Yes. So we want to understand the environment of spirited discourse that Seyfried herself called for and how the dynamics of, say, digital hostility contrasts so sharply with the historical, radical attempts to build an actual real-world community that she was studying.
It's a study in extremes, really. The extreme fragmentation of today versus the extreme cohesion of a historical commune.
Okay, let's jump right into the flashpoint.
So the controversy began shortly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who was the co-founder of Turning Point USA on September 10th.
And Seyfried posts a comment on Instagram.
She does. She called the late right-wing activist hateful. The comment was made under a post that was detailing some of his more controversial views, specifically citing his remarks on topics like immigration and transgender rights.
This immediately just blows up, a furious backlash. But what's really noteworthy here is Seyfried's refusal to simply apologize or retreat.
Not at all. In a December interview, she was incredibly explicit. She said she is not apologizing for the comment.
Whoa.
Yeah. She maintained her position, arguing that what she said was, and I'm quoting, pretty defactual and based on actual reality and actual footage and actual quotes. She basically insisted on her freedom to hold and express that opinion.
Yet, at the same time, we see her trying to walk this very fine line of nuance.
She is. Just a week after that initial comment, she posted a clarification. She noted that her remark had been irresponsibly, but understandably, taken out of context.
And this is where she brings up the idea of spirited discourse, right?
Exactly. She stressed its importance, and she expressed a worry that society was, quote, forgetting the nuance of humanity in the middle of all these heated exchanges.
That is the central difficulty she faced, trying to hold two seemingly contradictory positions at the same time.
I mean, she stated she could get angry about misogyny and racist rhetoric.
While also saying that Charlie Kirk's murder was absolutely disturbing and deplorable in every way imaginable. It's a real tightrope walk for public figures now.
And it was compounded by an earlier post she'd made, a more abstract one, stating, you can't invite violence to the dinner table and be shocked when it starts eating.
And the Seyfried incident wasn't isolated. That emotional volatility, it spread so quickly.
It did. We saw Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show temporarily suspended after he made comments insinuating without any evidence that Kirk's suspected shooter might have been a Donald Trump supporter.
And Disney, which owns the network, they cited those comments as ill-timed and insensitive.
Right. And when Kimmel's show returned, he had to insist he didn't intend to make light of the death of a young man.
What both of these incidents really underscore is how quickly public comments are just stripped of all context and used to fuel this broader political fire.
Yeah.
The emotional intensity is immediate. It's overwhelming.
Precisely. And that emotional intensity, that's what our academic sources identify as a central threat. So the question becomes, how does this kind of celebrity flashpoint relate to the global systems that are generating societal conflict?
That leads us straight into the core academic research we looked at on societal polarization. It's defined as, well, this social fragmentation of society into antagonistic factions.
Factions with vehemently opposed values and identities. And the paper states very clearly that this poses a profound long-term threat globally.
And here's where we need to look beyond just, simple disagreement.
We do. The research emphasizes that when polarization becomes extreme, it develops a large affective component.
Affective polarization, so driven by emotion.
Exactly. It means that people aren't just driven by love for their own political principles. They are driven intensely by by hatred, fear, and contempt for the opposition.
And that emotional piece, the research warns, significantly increases the likelihood of actual real-world violence.
It seems to map perfectly onto that instantaneous, visceral reactions Seyfried experienced, doesn't it? It's not just that we disagree on policy, it's that we actually loathe the people on the other side.
It absolutely does. And the mechanism driving this?
Information and communication technologies, ICTs, particularly social media. The sources say they provide a fertile ground for spreading content that actively exacerbates polarization.
And there's this dangerous spillover effect.
A crucial point. The digital emotional hostility leads directly to measurable offline violence and protests. Toxic rhetoric isn't just noise, it's a precursor to physical action.
The two core causal mechanisms they identify are disinformation and hate speech. Let's break those down because the distinctions here are really important.
They are. So misinformation is just false or misleading information, but disinformation, that is far more insidious.
Because it's deliberate.
It's a deliberate fabrication and dissemination of falsehood with an explicit intent to deceive. That intent, it just fundamentally shifts everything. It creates a world where truth becomes irrelevant and everything is weaponized.
And then there's hate speech,
which the sources define as abusive or hostile remarks intended to demean a segment of the population based on, actual or perceived characteristics.
And the frightening part is the cycle it creates. Repeated exposure breeds this deep intergroup contempt. And even worse, it reduces our collective ability to even recognize offensive language.
Right. The abusive rhetoric just normalizes and spreads without any friction. And this is not just an internal problem for any one country.
No, the sources are clear that the actors spreading disinformation are varied. They're often interconnected.
The threat comes from governments, especially in authoritarian regimes. It comes from political parties targeting their own domestic audiences during elections.
And from foreign adversaries. The paper cites some well-documented cases, like Russia influencing the 2016 U.S. election, or Iranian state actors sowing dissension globally.
And all that complexity takes us right into what the research calls the censorship paradox.
This seems to be the institutional tension right underneath Seyfried's plea for spirited discourse versus her recognition of hateful rhetoric.
It is. Governments often use internet censorship, suppressing content, and social media monitoring as tools to combat this stuff.
But it's a double-edged sword.
A complete double-edged sword. On one hand, some sources suggest these controls can be maybe necessary evils to keep polarization in check. I mean, if you do nothing, the problem just metastasizes.
So the academic view is that doing nothing guarantees polarization, but trying to fix it can actually make it worse.
That's the paradox. The sources highlight that censorship and monitoring are, at the same time, viewed as fundamental threats to free speech.
I see.
And when you combine those suppression tools with the presence of hate speech, they can actually fuel polarization by suppressing legitimate dissenting views. The dominant hateful rhetoric just gets amplified in the vacuum.
So the takeaway is, it's not one bad actor or one platform. It's the toxic brew of all these elements interacting in a nonlinear way that creates the environment Seyfried was navigating.
Exactly. The study uses complexity theory to show it's caused by these complex configurations of factors. But hate speech and deliberate deception are consistently shown to be core conditions for high polarization everywhere.
So we've established that modern fragmentation is fueled by this toxicity. But before technology, when people felt similar levels of repression, what did they do? Let's pivot from the digital controversy to the historical world Seyfried has been studying.
That takes us directly to her new film project, The Testament of Ann Lee. Seyfried is stepping into the shoes of Ann Lee, the founder of the Shakers. It's a deep dive into 18th century radicalism.
Ann Lee's vision was truly radical for her time. She believed herself to be the female incarnation of Christ. Her sect, which started in Manchester, England in 1758, it just completely rejected the social norms of the time.
They espoused gender and social equality, and most famously, they practiced celibacy. They completely rejected marriage and traditional gender roles for communal living.
And they were originally mocked as the shaking Quakers.
Right, because their worship involved what they called ecstatic song and movement. They would chant and shake vigorously in prayer.
And this wasn't just a ritual.
No, it was believed to literally purge sins from the body and mind. It offered this powerful, visceral, spiritual, and physical release for people who just couldn't fit into the repressive, rigid Church of England.
So Lee and a few of her followers immigrate to America in 1774, just 2 years before the Revolution, and they settle in Niskuna, New York.
And they become known for their devotion to perfection and simplicity, which you can see in the beautiful minimalist furniture they made. That became their main source of revenue.
But just like today, radical beliefs in an antagonistic society invited violence.
Absolutely. Despite the devotion of her followers, Anne Lee was seen as a profound threat by outsiders. She and the Shakers were frequently attacked by their neighbors in what the sources call violent mobs.
That's a direct pre-digital echo of that spillover effect we were just talking about, the intense emotional hostility leading to real-world persecution.
It is. And Anne Lee's struggle culminated in her death in 1784 at age 48 after a particularly severe attack. It's a powerful, tragic history.
And the Shaker legacy is fascinating. The movement reached 6,000 members in the 19th century, but because of that celibacy rule.
It was physically unsustainable. It has since dwindled to only 3 practicing Shakers left today. A utopian dream that, paradoxically, contained its own end.
So let's talk about the film itself. The director, Mona Fastfold, she calls the project a speculative retelling and a tribute to Anne Lee's dream. She's aiming for an epic scale, shooting on 35mm film and blowing it up to 70mm.
That really speaks to the seriousness of the project, and the preparation Seyfried undertook reflects that. She spent over a year preparing, focusing on dialect, singing, and movement work.
And the technical challenge was immense, especially with the language. I mean, there are no recordings of an 18th century working-class Mancunian accent.
Right, so they had to rely on literature, dialect coaches, and modern references to essentially reconstruct a lost sound.
But the real analytical interest here for us is how they captured the Shakers' essential quality, that visceral cohesion. This was an embodied community, not a digital one.
And the music and movement define that. The composer, Daniel Blumberg, adapted 12 original Shaker hymns and wrote 3 new songs using this really distinct sound palette.
I read it uses an ensemble of nearly 100 vocalists.
100 vocalists alongside tuned percussion, vast metal bell plates, and chimes, giving the score this unusual, otherworldly, and deeply communal feeling.
And the choreography is key.
It is. The choreographer used Shaker archive drawings and also drew inspiration from modern dance like Martha Graham's Appalachian Spring to depict those ecstatic prayer rituals. The focus was on creating embodied expressions of care, faith, and shared experience.
It's just incredible to consider these two narratives in parallel.
It really is. The effort to recreate that lost visceral community through intense, shared physical purpose. And then you have Seyfried, having immersed herself in that world, stepping back into our world, defined by instantaneous, toxic, and fragmented digital argument.
We started with the complexity of contemporary public discourse, fueled by deception, hate speech, and this struggle over internet controls.
And we finish by seeing Amanda Seyfried embody a figure who reacted to her own era's repression by creating an intensely rigid but profoundly communal utopian society. She sought clarity through absolute structure, even when it invited violence.
So what does this all mean? The Shakers, they offer this radical path towards social equality and spiritual release through ecstatic movement. Today, we're fragmented into antagonistic factions by the very technology we use to communicate.
And the core research is clear. Extreme polarization hinges on the presence of that toxic rhetoric, whether it comes from political parties, state actors, or just from us online. Anne Lee sought to shape the world anew through radical belief and intentional community building.
So when modern public life feels overwhelmed by the complexity of disinformation and these deep partisan splits, does the historical yearning for a radical, highly structured utopia, even one demanding total celibacy and conformity, does that reflect a fundamental human desire for clarity and cohesion that our current decentralized, toxic information environment simply cannot deliver? Something to think about as you navigate the nuance of your own feeds.